From issues to do with the legal profession and justice to more issues almost on the same, along the same vein in terms of justice, at least. The National Parole Review Summit convened at the Kgosi Mampuru, the second correctional facility in Pretoria this week. It is a landmark event bringing together policymakers, legal experts, rehabilitation practitioners, and victims advocacy groups. Its aim, we are told, was to confront a pressing national concern. Why are so many parolees returning to prison shortly after they are released? Perhaps more urgently, what must change to break that cycle? At the heart of these discussions is the reality of the country's parole and rehabilitation systems being under immense pressure. With overburdened programs, limited post-release support, and growing public anxiety about whether the system is truly working for offenders, victims, and communities, the Department of Correctional Services finds itself at a critical crossroads. So that was the one part of what we want to bring to you. At the same time, a separate but equally urgent debate is unfolding. Cape Town Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis calling for cell phone signal blocking technology to be rolled out in prison with Pollsmoor. This amid growing evidence that inmates are using mobile phones to coordinate criminal activities from behind bars. But the proposal, as you can imagine, sparked fierce opposition and debate. So how do we balance safety, justice, rehabilitation, and human rights in a system under strain? Let's unpack all of those themes, those complex and interconnected themes. I'm joined now by Singabakho Nxumalo for the Department of Correctional Services, as well as Miles Bhudu, founder of the South African Prisoners Organization for Human Rights, who will weigh in a bit later on. Singabakho, let me start with you. Just talk to me about the importance and the reason why this summit was held. It's about the parole system and reviewing how it's. I believe a bit of work went into it before we arrived at the point of the summit.
Yes, very good afternoon, and thank you for having us. Yes, a great deal of work did go into our parole system, hence even a call to perhaps the time has come to review it. We even had what we called an opposition paper, which because was when we went through the activity involved within the parole system and vis-a-vis the cries of the people saying a number of things, stating that they're not happy with the way things are happening, especially the victims of crime. What was more pressing from them was that they are brought in towards the tail end of the process, and they were not happy about that. But also the issue of parolees going back into the life of crime. There were many other factors, even the type of programs that were having to say, are they still relevant? So it's therefore necessary that we look into our parole system, come up with a position paper. Correctional services alone, will never really say, we are now in a position to say, yes, a new parole system. We needed to get experts, policymakers, runners, but also even people with lived experiences, the victims of crime, parolees themselves. So they had to participate. Hence, then, the need for that summit. It's not even, we're not even towards the end of the process, because after this, we still have to consolidate, which we'll do before the end of October, but still go back to the public now, for people also to make their own inputs in that specific document that would have produced at that particular time. So it's still a long way to go, but one can say we're, I think, halfway there, because it's necessary that we undertake.
What is the intention of the process, Singabakho? Ultimately, you'll have this fuses in what informed you at the start of the process and what came out of the summit itself, as well as the further engagements to happen. But what ultimately is the end goal? Okay,
we look at the Correctional Services Act. It was, and the parole system is an integral part of it. It's been in existence for a while now, and we've identified some gaps, not only as correctional services, but even people to interface with. So it was therefore necessary that we look into it. The review, therefore, was necessary in saying that we ought to come up with a new system that does not only close the gaps that we've identified, but how do we position it now even into the future? But also a system which is victim-centric, because those are the calls that have been made in saying that victims ought to play a much bigger role than what is happening currently. So as a department, we said, let us have this summit, but let us open this door quite wide so that we don't just limit ourselves in saying, okay, the parole, let's check that and there and see if we are winning. Hence, then you will see with the type of people that we invited into that summit, they come from different sectors playing different roles, so that at least, you know, they can take us into an era where we can say we now have a system that is working for all. Some even called for a completely new law just for the parole system, that does not only look at correctional services, the entire criminal justice system.
All right, I'll come. Let me bring in Miles Bhudu, founder of the South African Prisoners Organization for Human Rights Support. Miles, you watch this space quite closely and with keen interest. Just talk to me about these themes that came out of Summit about the need to relook the parole system. Is the system we have at the moment working? Is it victim-centric? And does it need to be victim-centric, or need to emphasize other elements equally?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I just very excited that Singabakho Nxumalo is still with the Department of Correctional Services. You know, he has been there since time immemorial, and if he was not in denialism and they are in denialism, he should have, in fact, conscientize, educate, and lobby ministers in and out, national commissioners in and out, about how far this thing comes in terms of a parole regime, a release policy, overcrowding in prisons, victim offender dialogues. And I mean, he should have used the opportunity all these years that he's been around there. I was there for the first day. I couldn't make it for very serious reasons the following day. The issue is there are recommendations that were made regarding the Victims' Rights Charter. He knows about it very well. As far afield as 2007, that Victims' Rights Charter, not a chapter, should have been incorporated in our Constitution, and the rights of victims should have now been embedded under a chapter, a section, a subsection, and a paragraph, like you have the rights of prisoners. They are not what the paper it is written on. But nevertheless, it is never, ever too late. The Department of Correctional Services need loyal correctional officers, people who take the country serious and be informed that the country is in transition. The country is not stagnant. And I have been there since after my release. I'm not talking about before I was released, and I've been hammering, I've been screaming, and I've been yelling, and everything has fallen on deaf ears, because there is this tendency that the Department of Correctional Services will be run like a private membership club, a family business, and to say at least like a glorified Bantustan. Recommendations has been made. None of them has been implemented since the heydays of Johan Kriegler, Judicial Inspectorate and Correctional Services. The Jolly Commission was at a heavy price tag done. None of those recommendations were implemented. Now we also had what I'm talking about, the Victims' Rights Charter, and the recommendations that were made at a ex-prisoners conference in 2015. It's almost 10 years, and nothing's happening. Everybody just talk about it, and I wonder whether the recommendations made at this parole review, and whether those recommendations will also be taken seriously.
All right, Singabakho, respond to that. What will it take for us to action some of what we've diagnosed? Will we always be in diagnosis mode? At what point do we talk to all of these processes that Miles Bhudu rightly points out? I mean, I'd even personally thinking about the Jolly Commission of Inquiry, a lot of work going into it in the assessment of people like Miles and others, no implementation.
Correctional services, we do not just talk, but we do put action into what we say. I'll give you a typical example. So long ago, the issue of victim offender dialogue was not mandatory for inmates before they're acquisited for parole to undergo through that. It is mandatory.
All right.
Why is that so? the issue of restorative justice, is very important. Deal with the harm that the victims will have in saying that this person wronged you. At no point you even had to interface with this person or even get to hear or this person get to understand the pain that you suffered at the time. The next thing you see him walking, down along the street and he says something, completely unpalatable. So with the cries, hence we had to relook into the system. So perhaps what Mali needs to understand is that as we're busy with this review system, we're not just sitting and saying we're waiting for that process to end. There are things that we're doing in the interim, but things like the review of our correctional programs, work is already underway in terms of that. But also how we ought to take inmates through rehabilitation, prepare them for parole placement, but also who gets to be placed out and the type of parole conditions that we place there, and how often do we revoke those placements if people are not complying. Because one of the calls that were made during the summit was that we ought to play a much bigger role in terms of educating the public about stigma, because a lot of parolees face a stigma once they're out there. Some are locked out, they don't even know what to do. So as a department, we need to go to that space.
In fact, I believe there was the input made by Dr. Casper Lotter from the Northwest University talking about the approach being punitive, stigmatizing, and saying that that model perpetuates high recidivism. Big word, recidivism. Come in on that point for me, Miles. Recidivism, the degree to which and the frequent offenders and people who were incarcerated go back to prison. Just to share some stats with our viewers, part of what the minister said at the summit itself was that, the number of inmates who have reoffended, just involved in violent crimes, 209 parolees in the past year had committed murder and 350 committed rape. What's behind? How do we explain this level of recidivism?
Thulasizwe, I will keep on hammering on the recommendations made at a conference 22, 23, 23, 24 in 2050s were passed in from all over the country, and hundreds and thousands, if not millions of taxpayers' monies were invested in a conference which I thought in 2015 upwards, we were not going to have this debate years down the line. I'm keep on hammering in. I gave the minister the hard copy of this recommendation. And until such time, these recommendations are taken seriously, monitored, evaluated, supervised, and enforced, we will keep on talking about recidivism. We will keep on talking about overcrowding. We will keep on talking about people who die behind bars, and then we are told it is natural causes, yet it was medical negligence. For when and for how long must we tell the Department of Correctional Services that they cannot do it all by themselves? I mean, even the recommendations talk about what the government and the Department of Correctional Services will have to make sure that they start working on processes where the community is educated about what happens in our prisons, what happens during imprisonment, what happens after imprisonment, and so forth and so forth. Until time there's this negligence and this denialism about recommendations, we will keep on screaming and yelling, right. And I've been doing this for the 35 years after my imprisonment.
Singabakho, from your department, from your vantage point, what explains this high level of recidivism, reoffending, let's use a simpler word, reoffending by ex-offenders who had been in the prison system and incarcerated? What makes a country like Finland, that is cited as having a 70% desistance level, that people who are in prison, 70% of them don't reoffend in Finland, and ours? What makes us differ from that country? What are they getting right that we are getting?
We've looked into that area, and what we picked up was quite interesting. Some of it may look and sound basic, but it is really the nudge of everything, because a parolee, that system is vulnerable. That person is likely to come back because, one, the guardian is not to provide for that parolee. He's unemployed. He's got no means, nothing. So you then have criminal groupings around there. So it's easy for them to recruit that person in to say, you are sitting doing nothing, come back, join us. that person will come back into our system within months. So we find that's one of the reasons. But as well, the guardians that will sign for parolees, we also pick, not all of them fully understand their responsibilities. We've been conducting monitoring exercises across the country. And when we do not find a parolee at home after 7 p.m., you ask a guardian, where is this person? They say, oh, we will usually come back home around 10 p.m. I think, but that's a violation. This person should be home. So it then tells you that at times even the guardian is not aware of their actual responsibilities. Hence, as a department, we do not just sit there and say, because we have violated, therefore come back, but to say, how best do we educate our people to understand their responsibilities, but also the interventions that we're making. We are busy now rolling out a number of training programs, not just targeting parolees, but also the victims of crime that Miles has been talking about, and also just ordinary members of the community, giving them skills which are so basic, even things like fixing mobile phones. And other things, working the land. That it's something to us is a need. To us is a niche market because we're able to recruit more, and they can use it in the immediate, to sustain themselves.
What's the scale of the problem? Before I turn to the other issue, what's the scale of the problem of reoffending? What's the percentage, and what age, and what kind of crimes? I was citing the numbers last year, having committed murder, 350 committing rape.
That's an interesting one because South Africa doesn't measure recidivism. People have been giving out all sorts of figures, some 60, some 70, some say 90, then indicating clearly that there is no empirical study because you look beyond just the work of correctional services to say, is it someone who is still under parole, or is someone who's basically an ex-offender? And for how long has that person
someone
been
who's
out?
done even with their parole
with other things. Hence, as the country have said, we need to come up with a tool that can assist us to measure recidivism, because currently we don't, and it does disturb when you hear these figures, people just mentioning them, and when you ask to say, give us empirical evidence, they are unable to do so. Even that there was a big debate when someone said the figure is above even 80, someone even 90 said, but then where to get that from? And the person was unable to produce.
The charge on that, though, so
it's the work of us.
You are the department that has the most to lose and to gain from this work, from those insights.
We are holding the pulse of the nation. Wrong in society, we feel it as correctional services. I agree with you. Hence, we're working with other partners in the criminal justice system in saying that we ought to do more in terms of how best we are able to work together in fighting crime, but also how to monitor that space and make sure that someone that has been processed from other players within the criminal justice system, by the time they come to us, we already have a full profile. And when we release that person back into society, everyone has a record of that person, because it does then assist in case there are things happening in an area where that person has been. I do need to move us to the next point, that I wanted us to talk to. Miles, let me start with you. The mayor of Cape Town, Jordan Hill Lewis, has a proposal. He says basically technology phone signals should be installed in prisons, starting with Paulsmoor, and he bases this on, I don't think many people will argue with this reality that you have in some instances inmates who are able to coordinate criminal activities on the outside using mobile phones that they have access. That's it with you.
Tulasizwe, the mayor should have first started talking about a document which was released by the DA in 2005 entitled Prison Work When Prisoners Work. Then he should have come up here and talk about something that has been a topic for the past 20 years in terms of the contraband of cell phones in South African prisons. And he has said absolutely nothing, because I think he was scoring a few little lousy political points. Having said that, though, the issue of jamming devices, I mean, the former Minister of Correctional Services, Ronald Lamula, went in length talking about how much money have they already spent doing research to implement the project. He left and he didn't say anything about it. And I think the mayor should have gone to the former Minister of Correctional Services and asked him, how far are you with this project? Because taxpayers' monies were invested in what you told everybody of us. Now, we are not going to take responsibility of those who use the cell phone to keep on committing in their graves. We talk of prisoners who have halfway out, who are in fact family members, and in fact contact with their families, so that you strengthen the family reunification after imprisonment. The rest, the Department of Correctional Services can talk about it, because we are not the Department of Correctional Services.
So talk about the rest then, as Miles suggests. How does this proposal sit with you? And is it something that you've considered before in the manner that Miles is describing?
Let's start by saying that and state that he is encouraging offenders to be responsible and wrong. To state that.
Even when he qualifies it by saying
it's
those
wrong.
that are halfway out.
Yes, it's wrong because those are contrabands. They're not allowed. For as long as
at no stage before you get to your point, are you saying at no stage during the incarceration, even at a point where the release of the offender is imminent and you're starting to talk about preparing them for reintegration, at no point is it allowed?
No, because we do offer an alternative.
Okay.
Yes. Let me come back now to your question. We are looking at an integrated security system, not just signal jamming, because our challenges are not only mobile phones. We're equally concerned about drugs that gets to be smuggled into our facilities, sharpened objects, and all other illegal items. Yes, we've been looking into an issue of the signal to say, are we able to localize like the blocking of that signal and sought even advice from relevant authorities, even approaching a CASA and saying that if we to go with a move of this nature, will it not interfere with the network in that particular area? And the advice we received was that you are likely to tamper with operations like your emergency services and stuff, but to say with technology to that effect. Hence, as a department, our approach is one of an integrated security team, saying that let us look at everything in our care and say how best are we able then to put in place this security system. Started with those, but we are picking them up at strategic points so that at the end of the day we have a security system that is able to make it a point that people do not find it easy to breach our security as a department.
Let's leave it there. What a fascinating conversation we've had this afternoon. Singabakho Nxumalo is of the Department of Correctional Services. We were also joined by Miles Bhudu, who is the founder of the South African Prisoners Organization for Human Rights Support. Stay with us. I'm back at the top of the hour for the start of the third hour of the show. Look at that. What happened? Oh, look at that. What happened to the time? This is the Week in News.